All right. Here we go. Welcome to How to Split a Toaster, a divorce podcast about saving your relationships from True Story FM. Did you know your toaster was a fourth dimensional device?
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Seth Nelson, and as always, I'm here with my good friend Pete Wright. Today, we're talking about fatherhood, specifically how to be a better father before, during, and after your divorce. To help, we've invited Tim McCarthy, educator, writer. This is my favorite part, Pete, and
Me too.
grandmaster in the martial arts. His writing on integrating Eastern philosophy into Western approaches to parenting gives us an opportunity to talk about the parent-child relationship across dimensions. Tim, welcome to the toaster.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Tim, what is it eclectic the right word for your career?
Well, I bounced around quite a bit out of college.
Yeah.
I mean, did everything from lifeguarding to waiting tables to being a bellhop to being a houseman, which is an assistant for a maid in a hotel. Then I finally settled back in my degree in education for about 10 years. And then from there went to the martial arts and stayed there 30 years. So
impressive.
In 30
Pete,
years
I
in
call
one
that-
place isn't bouncing.
No, that's not.
I call that a vagabond. He started out
Is that
early.
it?
He
Yes.
found his
Yeah.
Caribbean island. He settled down for 30 years.
He did.
Absolutely.
Well, you know, you wrote this. I mean, and this is an interesting subject for us. I think we talk a lot about divorce parenting, but we're not talking specifically about divorce. We're talking about parenthood, about being a father, being the best father that you can, before, during, and after the divorce. And my hunch is we'll probably land on some skills that are going to help dads, whether or not they're in a divorce situation.
I hope so.
But I hope so too. Let's start with this conversation around.
Well, let's start by
four-dimensional
saying
thinking.
one thing, Pete.
What?
We're both fathers.
Yes.
So any questions we're asking, we're quote unquote asking for a friend.
We're asking for a friend. In fact, my friend is always going to be Seth. I'm asking for Seth. So let's start with this. You wrote this book, Raising Four-Dimensional Children in a Two-Dimensional World. Let's start with the dimensions. What do you mean when we're talking about parenting across these dimensions?
All right. So the easy part is the two-dimensional world, which is where the three of us are right now. We're on the internet and we have two dimensions, length and width, and that's all you get on a screen, whether it's on a phone, a tablet, a TV. That's your two-dimensional world. And I believe we're living more and more in a two-dimensional world. Want to get the kids off the screens and back into life. Not completely, but at least for the most part of their day. And so into the real world, which has four dimensions, according to H.G. Wells, of course, length and width, not on the screen, is depth, which separates reality from the screen. And then the fourth dimension, according to H.G. Wells, is time. If something doesn't last, doesn't have duration, then we don't really perceive it. It's not part of our world. So that's the four-dimensional world. But I compare that, I run that parallel to the four dimensions of human potential, which are the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. So I want to raise four-dimensional children off the screen in the real world, but also balance them physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, which I don't think many people even realize, much less know how to do.
Yeah, I think it's that second one. Where you're pulling H.G. Wells. Was H.G. Wells a noted parent, or are we just referring to him as the sci-fi writer that I know him as?
Exactly. He was the one who came up with this idea many, many years ago. And I am not a nuclear physicist or any other kind to tell you what the actual fourth dimension is like.
Yeah,
but it
right.
sounded reasonable to me.
It sounds great. And I like the idea of going back to, especially when one of the things that you write about is like integrating the Eastern and Western sort of philosophies, and the Eastern of sort of spiritual growth, whether you're talking about, some families, some people, some cultures embrace, organized religion, some just embrace more of a philosophy around how we relate to the world around us and call that their spirituality. This whole idea of turning from 2 dimensions to 4 dimensions and embracing the whole relationship with our kids, I think it's provocative to me, and it feels like this is where where we see some potential holes once we become focused so internally on the divorce process. Right. And I guess maybe I'll turn to you, Seth. Like when you're thinking about the risk here, in my mind, is thinking about divorce at the expense of attention focused on kids.
Oh, Pete, 100%. We talk about it all the time on the show. Is easy to say, hard to do. Live your
Yeah.
life, not your divorce. You only have those moments with your children when you have those moments with your children. And if you are filling up that time in your head, in your actions, on your phone, dealing with your divorce, which you should not be doing in front of your children anyway. That seems obvious to say, but not always easy for people to do. And my clients, I have them trained when I call and they say, I'll call you back. The kids are in the car. That's a perfect answer, right? That's what you want. And then from there, when you're with them, you cannot do anything about your divorce, as in dealing with your lawyer, getting your documents together, getting prepared for a hearing, whatever the case may be. What you can do is help your case by taking the 2-dimensional world, the screen, as Tim says, and when you're at the game and the co-parent isn't there, and you video it, or your kid is smiling and you take a picture, you can shoot that to your co-parent and say, just wanted you to have this photo. She had a great game. So there's things like that you can do, but you got to live in the moment. And what happens is people don't. They let the system overpower them. They want to figure out how they can fix the system. They do all these other things. And I say, just back off. Just back off. Live your life.
So let's look at the dimensions and think about. I'm curious. I'd like to hear from you, Tim, as we walk through these 4 dimensions, how they manifest in both. I think a good role model relationship as a dad, right, asking for a friend, but also but as specifically to the relationship with the kiddo. So physically, what are we talking about? Being present or making them work out?
Well, if you're not present, it's hard to have much of an effect. So
Right.
I think Barack Obama, who wasn't even president at the time, gave his talk and said the main thing you can do as a parent is to be present. If you're not there, and he went through the statistics about what happens when the father's in prison, or, I mean, even if he's not in prison, if he's just in another city and doesn't want to pay attention to the kids, what a hole that is in the child's life. So being present physically, yes, but you've got to think about the child first. One of the things I say at the very beginning in the prenatal chapter is the difference between being a child and a man is when you get married and have a child, you put the child first. And then during pregnancy, you put the wife second. And that leaves you number 3. And I'm sorry, but that's being a man, in my opinion. And so you've got to care for the child, put his needs or her needs first, and then we can go through physically, mentally, emotionally. So physically, what do they eat? And is it appropriate? And whether you're a health nut or not, be aware of what you're feeding your child. And if they're bouncing off the walls, it's probably too much sugar. Second, what kind of exercise do you give them? Are you creating a couch potato by example or by the activities you give them? Oh, here, take this tablet and play some games. No, get out in the yard, play catch. play tag, run around, climb some monkey bars, go for a swim. No matter where you live, there's fun things to do. Get out in the four-dimensional world and enjoy them. Activity, any kind of physical activity. Teach them to ride a bike, training wheels, 2 wheels, etc. So let me pause right there before we go on to a different dimension. Any question?
I look at this and I think, okay, that you talk about the screen, the 2-dimensional screen. To Seth's point, like, it's hard to go to events as parents where the context is we're parents and not see the parents on the screens all the time.
By example.
Yep, I agree that. And also I think with the physical, it doesn't have to be that big of a project, so to speak. Yeah. It doesn't have to be getting in the pool or getting in the car and getting in the pool and all this stuff. It could be, our routine after dinner to start winding down is to go for a walk. And we go for a walk as a family. It's free. You put on the shoes, you head outside. And then that's just time to chat and talk. Now a lot of parents are like, oh yeah, good luck getting those kids to bed. But there's all sorts of ways you can do this. And what I found when I was raising my son is the more stuff we could do together like that and going to the park. And then when he got older, it actually was COVID. We were fortunate enough to be able to do this financially, but we joined a kind of a gym that was online, and we worked out 3 days a week in our living room during COVID, and got whatever gym equipment that could fit in our little condo to make it happen. So there's certainly things you can do to instill that kind of sense of got to get moving.
Well, I love that, Seth, too, because again, it goes to that role model behavior, right? It's not just, I want to get my kid moving. It's, I want my kid to see me moving, right? I want to use that as a model for, forever.
And I would bet, I don't know this for certain, I would bet that the statistics are, if you're working out with your kid or you're doing the fun stuff with their kid or you're doing yoga at home and your kid's doing it next to you, they're seeing it, they want to do it, right?
Yeah, right.
At least up to a certain age before they get to that, I want to do the opposite of my
kid. Yeah, exactly.
That'll come.
and then you become a couch potato and they keep working out.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right. Okay, so let's talk about the mental dimension.
Let me call a timeout here. I think just 1 sec.
So Pete, you getting exercise? You get exercise with your kids?
My kids out exercise me every single day. We used to, but now they're just more fit than me.
Yeah, same with mine.
Sorry, but my wife left this room to me, and the kitchen is here, and dinner's about to burn. If I didn't know,
at least you didn't. Tim, you're talking to a divorce lawyer, and I heard every other word, and you said my wife left me, and I'm like, I'll send you a retainer. All right, let's move to the mental.
Yeah.
All right. So mentally, especially in the early years, the more attention you give them, the more, just as an infant, directing their attention, talking to them, even before they understand what the words mean, reading to them, spending time just with them to develop the brain very, very early. Before the school years. Once they're in the school years, of course, you've got the teachers, the professionals handling most of that. But again, they don't teach curiosity and they don't teach problem solving. And so that's where you're interacting with them, again, on their own level. One of the things I'm proud of that I do is I divide my advice, my book, into chapters by age group. So the physical needs of an infant compared to a preschooler, compared to a school age, to a preteen, to a teen, very different. Mentally, the same thing. An infant, you're just trying to get the brain to connect. It's forming thousands of synapses a second, and you're just trying to get the brain used to working, because a child who's ignored pretty much doesn't develop into a bright child. So that's something you can do. And then preschool years, what you can do, you don't have to put them into the preschool that gets them into Harvard, but get them to be active mentally. Questions, answers. I mean, even if you read a story together, you don't just read the story. You say, what do you think is going to happen next? Why do you think the doggy was barking? And just create that curiosity. When you get into the teenage years, this is kind of mental, but also kind of spiritual. What's his agenda? When you listen to somebody, you watch Fox News. What's their agenda? Now you switch over to MSNBC. What's their agenda? The same event happened. They had a totally different take on it. And then they start to think, well, if my boyfriend says I should have sex with him, what's his agenda? Okay. And so, just different ways of thinking that you would develop throughout the years.
Seth, did you do a lot of Fox News, MSNBC switcheroo when you were raising your son?
I did not. I will not say which one of those I cringe at to watch, but there is one. But Tim said something at the younger years that really struck me, Pete, is that when you ask the question about the book, like, what do you think's going to happen next, or why do you think the dog is barking, or how did that make you feel? There's no wrong answers because it's just what you think. It might not. And then when something else happens, you say, wow, I wonder what would have happened if the author would have written it the way you thought about it. We might have a different book, a different story. So when you have these things that talk to what do they think, what do they feel, and there's no wrong answer, it really kind of creates that curiosity and safe space to be able to develop and grow in a healthy mental environment.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, if I could just insert a simple game, the one sentence story. And we start out, I'll start, and then Seth goes second and Pete go third. Once upon a time, there was a huge dragon.
Named Pete.
Oh,
and then you go, Pete.
Yeah, he was the scaliest of all the dragons.
Yeah, right. We played this game with Kai as a kid.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
And it goes from there.
So you can play back and forth with your child or in a group of 2 or 3 kids. Just simple
Tim,
games like that.
I know we've got emotional and spiritual to cover, but how does all of them play into what's happening during or after a divorce? And you can weave in the emotional and the spiritual as well when you're talking about
the
that.
emotional has to be the big part. There's, of course, the child is wondering what he did wrong or what she did wrong to cause the divorce. And so that's a factual mental thing that you can address with the child. You did nothing wrong. It's not your fault. But emotionally, that's still there. There's that tug that what did I do? What can I do to make it better? How, this is all, just this, and the kids don't have the emotional maturity to handle it. I mean, Seth can tell you from experience, the adults don't have the most emotional maturity to handle a divorce.
Especially when they're compromised by a divorce, right?
Yeah. And so you've got to guide them. Early years, you help them identify their emotions. You name it to tame it. Oh, that you're feeling angry. And a 2-year-old who's having a terrible 2 fit doesn't even know what he's feeling. He never felt that before, and he doesn't know that that's anger. Name it to tame it. Then start teaching methods of handling your emotions. Okay, when you're angry, count to 10. Why? Well, first of all, it gives you time. But second, it gets you out of the limbic emotional reptilian brain that wants to bite somebody's head off and into the prefrontal cortex where you're counting, and you can start thinking of a more emotional response. And so one of the things you can do with kids is try to get them out of the emotion and into thinking about something so that it's more rational, less emotional.
And along with that is, Pete, on the emotional side, parents, sometimes unintentionally, will lean on their children and be like, well, I miss you when you're gone. And they think they're being helpful to tell them how much they miss them.
Oh, but,
right? They're not, I know you're going to have fun at mom's, but I'm really going to miss you. Have a good time. But they hear the I miss you, which then makes them feel like, dad's lonely, or mom could be saying it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
like, this parent is lonely. I should stay here to be with them.
Right.
Right.
And
And
how much of
subtly,
that
what
is
is the first thing that
manipulation?
what is the first thing that we're instilling young kids is that you should feel some sort of shame for leaving dad,
That's
right?
right.
To go
And
spend mom.
it's not intentional.
No.
You know, it could be, I'm going to miss you when you're gone. You could even say it kind of like upbeat, but it can cause problems. So it should be, you know, I'm so excited. You're going to have a good time at mom's, or you're going to get to sleep in your bed that you've been used to. And you get to see your dog, like all the positives, positive, positive, positive. And well, Dad, are you going to miss me? Yeah, I'm going to miss you, but I'm more excited that you're going to have a great time. Of course, I'm going to
Yeah.
miss you, but you're going to have a great time. And by the way, I got stuff to do that I can't get done when you're around.
Yeah, right.
I got to work. Like, you can joke
Yeah.
about it, right? Humor is a great way to get through some of this. So,
And just simply saying, are you going to miss me? Yes, I love you. And just, as tougher that is to say, especially from dads, I love you.
Yeah.
I say, I'm going to miss you. Who's going to take out the trash?
Yeah, right. Who's
You
going to
know?
take the dog out to poop?
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Somebody's got to do the scut work.
And that's why we had children to start with.
That's why we had children.
That, and to take care of us in our old age.
Well, I want to transition to the fourth dimension, specifically in the context of divorce, because to me, spirituality, and I'm not a particularly religious person, but I do I do truck with this idea of spirituality. Spirituality is another way to describe a sense of broader awareness, and I'm curious how kids, how you can create a spiritual awareness for kids, and even when it matters more as they're older kids, teenagers, to be aware and have a presence of mind to understand and find strength through a difficult process like divorce. How do those things relate? It doesn't even necessarily need to be specifically about divorce, but through grief, through a difficult transition, what are we doing to engender that kind of a relationship with our kids?
Well, the first thing is to care about others and to care for others. And so, especially if a child has a little brother or a little sister, you want to teach them to care for, not be jealous of, not compete with, but care for their younger sibling. And then the parent, how can you care for mommy while you're with her? How can you care for daddy?
Yeah. You know what,
And
that brings up, I dealing with some friends. We've done, they're regular guests on the show because they're going through a very difficult divorce, and one of the kids is a teen and said, specifically to that point, why should I care about anything? You and mom don't care about each other, right? Like, that is a message that was given to this family by a contentious divorce, and recreating connections between siblings, that parents can get divorced and still care about each other, seems really important.
And even if they don't care about each other, the child cares for the parent. And when I'm with mom, how can I take care of mom? And when I'm with dad, how can I take care of dad? What can I do to show that I love them?
Right. Seth, what do you get out of that?
Well, I think that, and I like how Tim's book is broken out with different ages, because it's really an age question, right? Teenagers are difficult no matter what, right? So what I find always interesting, and let's just take, you have a teenage daughter in an intact marriage, loving family, great upbringing, doing all the things right. And I know couples like this. And the dad goes, I cannot deal with her. My teenage daughter will be a loving little child like I remember. I go into the kitchen, I come back out, and she's fucking crazy. And she's like lost her shit and is screaming.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know anything about that. I shouldn't have answered so quickly.
No, exactly. Asking for a friend, responding for a friend. So literally, you take that same scenario, and she goes, talks to her mom, and mom calms her down, right? You take that same scenario in a divorce, and mom saying, dad can't handle her. Nothing has changed with this child.
Yeah.
Nothing has changed with this child. And now they're saying she's got a bad relationship with dad. They should be with mom the whole time, or the reverse, right? They're now young men. They really need more time with dad. Like mom doesn't know how to handle them, right? Like there's all this stuff that she still wants to baby them. And they're saying, fuck off, mom.
Yeah,
right.
right.
Like, stop asking me questions. Like
Yeah,
it's all the same behaviors in intact families as when they get divorced. And then you throw the divorce on, and let me tell you, those kids are smart. They're going to manipulate it. They are going to manipulate it to get what they want. And if you guys aren't on the same page and aren't calling, and the best thing you can do when you're dealing with these teenagers like this is communicate and say, look, I'm struggling. This is how she's responding at my house. What, if anything, are you doing when this happens at your house? And if you have a parent on the other side that wants to work with it, the answer will be, well, I would try this, this, and this. This is what I do. Parent that doesn't want to do it, she's like, that never happens at my house. It must be you.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But then when you're in court, you say, Judge, I reached out to my co-parent. It's a teenage daughter. Like, these judges get that.
Yeah.
Right? So that's how you kind of try to work through it. But what you do, if you can work it out, you kind of get the kids what they're not expecting. You're like, no. I talked to mom about that. You talk to mom? Yeah, we talk all the time. And guess what we talk about? You.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
In fact, you want me to show you all the texts that we're doing back and forth about you? Like, you know, that blows their mind. They can't believe it.
Yeah, because there's no gray area when you're in that space as a kid, right?
That's right.
And empathy also has kind of no gray area, right? That draws some very hard edges, hard lines, boundaries between relationships. And so I think that, I mean, I like coming back to this, like teaching kids to care kind of gets you over that hump, right? Like teaching kids to be empathetic helps them understand when you as parents are trying to be empathetic to one another too. Again, that role model behavior.
Yeah. And
You know,
I mean, as Seth was saying, the parents will, the kids will manipulate two parents in different rooms, much less in different homes.
Yeah.
Oh, I did it. I'll tell you, my favorite answer from my mom was, I don't know, ask your dad. I'd go ask my dad. I don't know, ask your mom.
Ask
I'd
your
go
mom.
back to mom. Dad said, it's fine. Dad doesn't care. It's fine, mom. Okay. I went back. Mom doesn't care. It's fine. Out the door I went. You know? We like, hey, if no one's making the decision, I'm going to take that.
Right. Yeah. That's abdication of responsibility.
That's right. And I was really shocked because it was whether or not I could buy cocaine. So, you know.
Unfortunately, you know a good lawyer.
Yeah, exactly.
Florida.
You know, it's Florida. It's like they sell it at the gas station. Yeah.
And just one other point, though, about what you're saying. Sometimes, like the teenage daughter going off the rails, mom is the better person to talk to because she understands the girl, what she's going through emotionally. And dad may be an emotional cripple and not understand and may be better off saying, well, talk to your mom about that. I think she'd be better, you know, give you better advice.
Yeah. It's go ahead, Pete.
Well, which is still an empathetic argument. Like being able to say as dad, I'm not right to answer this question. I don't have the experience or you know, to be able to give you a great answer here. You should talk to mom is an empathetic argument. It's an awareness of the other person. Sorry, Seth, go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, I was going to basically say the same thing, but not as eloquently.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. Threw you a bone. You needed one. It's been a while.
That was so sweet.
Until I told you it was a bone.
Yeah, until you told me. Yeah, no, we were great.
Yeah,
we were doing great, right?
Exactly. So, Tim, how does this all play into spiritual?
So, spiritual, I firmly believe we all have a spiritual side. And what people who are not spiritual tend to focus on the mental. They look at logic, they look at science, and say that if I can't see it, if I can't prove it, it can't be real. So you're basically applying the laws of science, the mental dimension, to the spiritual dimension. Mm-hmm. Now you talk to somebody religious, and some of them don't even accept evolution. Okay, they want to apply the laws of their religion to everything. Again, I think they are separate and they have separate rules and separate truths. And so, for example, you talk to a scientist, what's the explanation of love? Oh, well, you have this chemical released from this gland and blah, blah, blah. That just shows he doesn't understand the emotion. He's trying to put his worldview on something that he can't explain. So I believe the spiritual realm is that way. You talk to people who are spiritually aware. It is the realm of belief, not of proof. And so you have to help your child develop in that direction. Now, if you have a religion, you take them to your church, your mosque, your temple. You take them to Bible school, to Torah study, to study the Upanishads, whatever scriptures you have. If you are not religious, then you educate them in morality, which is the mental way of understanding right and wrong. Okay, you set up rules and basically rules of what's right and what's wrong, and you teach your children that according to their age. Little kids, you don't lie, you don't steal. As they get older, there are a lot more nuances to what not lying means and not stealing means. So you constantly refine what that means. So,
And I think on the spiritual as well is part of understanding that we are part of a world and universe that is bigger than ourselves. And all you need to do is look at a sunset to understand that, right? And one of the things that I did in my 20s is I helped deliver a 50-foot sailboat from Grand Cayman to St. Pete. And you have all these rules on the boat and who does what, and there's a hierarchy for safety and who's on watch. There was one rule the captain had. Everybody was on deck at sunset. And he literally, like, you were on deck watching that sunset. And those were the greatest times on that trip. Just to, like, take it all in. You got nothing but water in this little boat. 50 foot is not a small boat, but when you're in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, it feels really small. It feels
pretty small, yeah.
Yeah. And I think you do that on a daily, weekly, whatever basis you can to get wherever you can to just take a breath. Just watch it happen.
Spirit.
Yeah. Yeah, you could. Boy, was that ever true during the eclipse? Right. I've never seen such a collective exaltation of feeding the spirit as when people come together over something so much bigger that is so difficult to kind of wrap your head around.
The only time I remember that, Pete, in my lifetime was like Who Shot JR. I felt like we all came together.
You are so right about that. You are so right. Oh my God. Yeah. Who shot JR? Does it matter? No. Just matters that we all cared real hard.
It was collective. It was bigger than ourselves. We didn't know,
But if I might say that was more emotional than spiritual.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. For the guy getting shot, it was physical. Okay.
Well, I'll tell you what. I think these. I bringing it back a little bit to the divorce context, right? And not eclipses or Dallas in the late 70s, early 80s. I just get the sense that having that being able to compartmentalize a little bit around the four dimensions is useful particularly if you're struggling as a parent, as a dad, to figure out where your holes are, where your blind spots are. And right now we're particularly in a Western cultural area of blind spots abound, right? When you throw in divorce to that, it's just very challenging to see what you're missing.
And especially for dads, the emotional part. I was raised by wonderful parents. They stayed together until they died, but they did not educate me well emotionally. It happened much, much later. And so if we can educate our kids and educate ourselves at the same time, one of the things I love, we haven't talked about martial arts at all. One of the things I love about teaching the martial arts is that if I want to teach the adults something in a family class, I focus on the kids. And I tell the kids, This is why you're doing it. This is how it applies to your life. I'm not teaching the adults, but they're learning it by the way I teach the children. And so when you teach your child something, especially emotionally or spiritually, you not only relearn it, but you expand on the learning that you for yourself as you do it to the child.
Right. Fascinating. I'll tell you, this has been great. Thank you so much, Tim. We already name dropped the book. Where do you want to send people to learn more about your work and your writing, and what links can we share?
Well, the simplest place to find out about the book and what I do is 4D as in dimension, 4D-2D.com. And you can't forget the dash. You end up in China somewhere. That's the internet for you. 4D
dashes matter.
-2D.com.
We're talking about Eastern and Western philosophies. We'll
Maybe
take a
you wanna
trip
go.
to the Orient.
Maybe you want to end up there and watch a sunset. Tim McCarthy, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. We sure appreciate it. And now we will turn our attention to a listener question. All right. Tim, thank you. Andy should be back momentarily.